Okay, so today we are going to be discussing in spoilery detail The Lost Metal, which is the conclusion to Mistborn Era 2. I'm joined with my friends Michael from Knipp and Bookborn. Both channels will be linked down in the description of this video, but we are going to be discussing full spoiler detail for Eras 1 and Era 2. There will be no wider Cosmere spoilers in this video, though. But I wanted to start out the discussion of this book with the most important plot point, I think, which is how cute is Max and his little puppy drawings and his cat drawings?
I mean, I do take issue a little bit that Waxillium's son is named Maxillium.
Maxillium.
I actually had a little crisis about it. Like, I had to text a few people being like, Brandon Sanderson, what are you doing?
Either do a junior or do something different. That's too similar. But they called him Max a lot, and he was so cute.
He was cute. I liked him. I just took issue with his name.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. Did either of you have any issue with the time jump?
I mean, it feels like it was a little bit of an excuse, I guess, to skip a lot of potential character development moments people could have wanted to see. Mm-hmm. That's like one of the things you could do with the time jump is it allows you to have the characters in a completely separate space than they were in the original set of books. That being said, it let you have a fresh perspective of where we were now. So I'm a little bit mixed about it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always mixed about a time jump.
Yeah, I feel like it's really common for fantasy enders.
Yeah. I felt like there was a lot we missed, but also in some ways I was like, well, but this also helps us get where we need to be. I will say, I think for me, the thing I missed most was actually just the relations with Southern Scadrial. Like, I think that's where I felt like I was missing out the most on, because that was one of the most interesting plot points to me, and I was kind of surprised at how little we actually still understand about Southern Scadrial.
Yeah, I was about to say that whenever you brought them up, because they served a significantly smaller purpose to this plot than I would have expected.
I thought we were, like, gonna go to Southern Scadrial this book. Like, I thought it was gonna be, like, the main plot point. So, yeah, it surprised me.
Yeah.
They sort of set it up at the beginning of the book that it might be the case, and then he goes a different direction with it.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say it's kind of Brandon Sanderson's style at this point to have a lot of potential comparisons or parallels to important political points in history or in current times, but then to subvert it by just not answering any questions about it. And that's sort of what we did here is the last book led up to a lot of like industrial age political questions. And especially with the way that Marcy was talking about revolutionizing the way they did government and the way that discovering this new country could lead to a lot of potentially interesting topics. And then he chose to sort of bounce away from that, which is kind of Sanderson's thing. He likes to hint at things that make you think of relevant parallels and then sort of take a story a different direction. It avoids some pitfalls while not answering a lot of other questions.
Sure. I think that this book, the beginning of the book, was set up to be a very political book, and I'm pretty glad that he bounced away from doing that, just because I think Era 2 is more of like a pulpy, campy, fun, lighthearted story. It's not supposed to be as dark or as deep as some of his others, and I think going too heavily political would have really changed the tone, and I was happy to keep it more action and fast-paced and off-the-wall comments like he has made this whole series.
Yes. And he has to do that. I feel like based on the fact that this is his pulpy action series, you have characters within scenes in this book and previous books where they go on essentially mass killing rampages, and you're supposed to have fun with that, and you can have fun with that when he takes it away and puts it in the fantastical context. So he allowed us to do that again, which I also enjoy.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah, this whole series is a very different tone from Sanderson's typical stuff, and I like that he stays with that, and I think it's fun to do this every now and then. I wouldn't like it for every one of his books, but for this series, it's been a nice little reprieve, like a fun, campy story.
I think it's why Mistborn Era 2 for me is so fresh, because it is so different in tone than almost any other fantasy that is out there right now. Like, even if you compare it to like the Kings of the Wild series, the bands, or whatever that is, it's still a very different take on the comedic light action attempt at fantasy than those series are. And it feels so unique in the fantasy genre that I think that's one of my main draws for it.
Mm-hmm. Which, Michael, do you like Wayne?
Yeah, I don't know if that's popular to say in this group. It talking about liking Wayne is always a controversial subject depending on who I'm talking to, but I do. I'm not saying that every one of every one of his jokes hits. I think that Wayne is the perfect example of you have to say 30 jokes for one of them to hit, but I love Wayne. Okay. I think he's great.
Good. Well, you mentioned that there were a lot of dick jokes in your review.
Yeah.
Which there were in this book, but it had me like, wait, does he not like my boy? Bookborn, do you like him?
You know... me and Wayne are going to always have a struggle. Wayne's sense of humor is like the opposite of sense of humor. It reminds me of like when I first joined my husband's family and that was their sense of humor. And I had to be like, oh, okay, like that's not mine, but okay. And that's what Wayne reminds me of. I will say I do like the idea of Wayne. Like, the stuff that he has gone through and the stuff that he goes through in this novel, I think are very interesting, and how someone would use humor to combat that. Is Wayne on paper one of my favorite characters? Not necessarily. So
that is the most tactful booktuber way of saying I don't like something, but other people can. That's cool.
I'm not really shy about telling my unpopular opinions. I don't actually hate Wayne. I did really dislike him when I first started reading Era 2, and when I reread it in preparation for The Lost Metal, I actually appreciated Wayne a lot more. Like, and I think it was hard because when I read Alloy of Law, I think I had just come off of reading Mistborn and the first two Stormlights. And then I went back to Alloy of Law. This was a long time ago. And, like, the tonal difference between those is so big. And I think for me at the time, it was too big. And now I can appreciate Era 2 a little more for, like, it's something different.
I think a lot of people have that hurdle. Because it's still called Mistborn, they expect more Mistborn.
Yes.
But it's just its own thing. It's not... I don't think it should be compared. It's because it's not trying to be.
It's on Scadrial and it uses the same magic system, and sure, it's a part of the larger story, but it's like, if you advertise it as like the next Mistborn, that's an incorrect advertisement in a lot of ways, I feel like.
Yes. I very much agree with that.
It's hard. Like, it's hard to know how you were supposed to handle that, because he does address characters that are from the original Mistborn, and it's still a continued story from the original Mistborn, and some of the themes carry through, but at the same time, it's a different genre of book, which, like, on the reverse side of that, I think that's why it appealed to me so hard, because I read the entire Cosmere in 1 year, or what I read of the Cosmere, I read in 1 year. And so when I got to Mistborn Era 2, I was a little bit not burnt out, because I love the Cosmere. But yes, like it was like when I hit Mistborn Era 2, I was like, this is so different. This is what I needed right now.
Yeah.
And it works for that.
Yeah. I feel like it's just your style too, Michael. Like, it doesn't surprise me that you dig it so much.
Right. It is I criticized it for not going deeper, and I still think that that's a little valid. But for me, it was what I wanted when the Alloy of Law scene where they realize that there is a behind the scenes coup happening at the party that they're at.
Yeah.
And then he starts throwing tables and shooting guns. And I was like, oh, this is very nice. Yes. I like this.
Yes. Yeah, it's very theatrical. It's very like, we say something's going to happen, and then boom, it happens, and then it's this big scene, which is fun. I mean, if it's self-aware, if it's like intentionally doing it, then I think it's fun.
Yes.
But as far as the time skip goes, I think the thing that I appreciated the most about it was seeing Wayne and Marcy established as partners. I thought that they worked so well together. it was nice seeing their friendship be more on the forefront instead of just like subtle hints of it. The way they kind of bounced off of each other. She would throw an insult at him. He would think it was hilarious and then add to it. And like stuff like that I thought was so fun to read.
Yeah, that's funny. I was going to bring that up separately. My favorite part of the time jump was the same thing, because I feel like that was a relationship that I actually think would have been not as fun to read about developing. I think that one's a good relationship to just be like, it happened. You don't need to know the details. And now we're here. And I really liked that. It showed a different side. To pull Wayne away from Wax, I think was actually very smart for the fourth book, and made it feel like we were learning new things about characters, which felt good.
Yes, I agree.
And nothing that happened in the time jump felt like it was not set up or alluded to in the previous books. It felt like we were taking a natural conclusion where Wayne and Marcy were forming that relationship at the beginning. You know, we had Steris and Wax forming that relationship. And so it's not like I've seen instances where in a book you have a time jump and an author uses that time jump to completely set up everything as if it were a different series because he wanted to tell a different story. And this is not what that was. Yeah. It was using what was told before to make a logical conclusion.
Yes, and the character development felt really natural for each character, not like he was switching things around. And it felt like none of them changed so much that it felt like I was being left behind. It all made sense, and we still got arcs out of them in this book, even with starting in a different place. I think just in general, it was handled very, very well.
Sure.
Yeah, I agree.
Cool. So as far as the plot, Michael, how did you feel about the plot, Michael?
The actual plot of it depends, right? Because there's so many plots that happen within this book that overlap.
I feel like that was your main thing that you honed in on in your review.
Because I think this book is trying to accomplish so many things at once. I think that the mystery we're talking spoilers, right?
Yes.
Whoops. So the actual plot line of there is a bomb that is going to be set off. That whole plot line I think was handled really well, and I think that was along the lines of the rest of Mistborn Era 2 that we saw, and all of the, like, let's figure this out, you find a clue, it leads somewhere else, you find a clue, there's lots of action between. I thought that part was handled pretty well. That's what I'll say about that part of the plot. I think that it was another Mistborn Era 2 book.
Okay.
What parts did you like, though, Michael? Because I have similar issues. Era 2 isn't my favorite. Like, we've already kind of established that with Wayne. I feel the same way about. So Era 2 is never going to be something that, like, probably gets a 5-star for me like his other works. But sure. for this one, like, I thought it was a good Era 2 book. I did feel like there was a lot of parts that felt a little unfinished to me. Like, it didn't necessarily feel like the end of an era in such a way that I think there might be a much smaller time skip between Era 2 and Era 3 than I previously thought. Because things felt very open-ended in a way. Like, when Mistborn ends, that is a trilogy that can be completely, like, you don't need to read anymore. Like, it ends. Yes. And I do not get that feeling at the end of this book. Yes. Like, it didn't end. There was a lot of open-ended things and a lot of things that felt very rushed to me. My biggest gripe was, like, the Bands of Mourning scene when we find out that they're drained and then we just let the Southern Scadrials have them. That scene, like, felt unfinished. Like, it just felt completely, like, did not make any sense to me. And I had those issues kind of throughout the whole book. Did I like the book? Yeah, I gave it 4 stars. Like, I think overall I really enjoyed a lot what was happening, but it did just feel less finished than so many of other Sanderson's works, in my opinion.
I feel like Sanderson was trying to do so many things in this book, and I think that's my main criticism there as well, is it did not finish it did not feel like it finished Mistborn Era 2. Mm-hmm. Even though on paper you could take every single character and say, here's the conclusion of their storyline, and maybe if it had been handled differently, or this is like even where you place the plot points at different parts of the book. Like, maybe if the finale of the book wasn't still more setting up things for something that's not the ending of this series, it would feel more like it was conclusive. Where the majority of this book, and I'm not going to complain that we spent so much time exploring Cosmere elements. I love those elements. But if you were trying to wrap up Mistborn Era 2 and the Mistborn Era 2 characters, it feels like he only did lip service to that because he was spending so much time. He was asking more questions than he answered vibe-wise. Like, if I realize if you take a paper and you say, here's the conclusion of this, here's the conclusion of this, you could say he finished Mistborn Era 2 and he wrapped up the storylines for these characters, but it doesn't feel that way.
I agree.
No, yeah. I think that's very, very truthful. And with this being our second conclusion from Sanderson that we've gotten, there's a lot of pressure on this to be a solid, satisfying conclusion, especially because Mistborn Era 1, so many people loved it, so many people didn't love it, so it's like, okay, what's this one going to be? And I do agree, I think it would have been better if he tried to wrap it up so that it felt holistic as its own series. You keep calling it what are you calling it, Michael? A quadrilogy?
Quadrilogy?
I think it's a quartet, right?
It's a quartet.
It's probably what it is.
I'm
not very smart.
Quartet,
yeah,
right? But a quad can also be four. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I've just never heard the term quadrilogy, but it doesn't matter.
It's because I'm not a very smart person.
No.
Quartet, a quad.
Doesn't matter.
What's a quad?
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
I feel like it would have been a lot more satisfying if he had chosen to make this quartet feel like it could live on its own, like Mistborn Era 1 does.
I feel like Mistborn
while
Era 2
still tying
doesn't.
into other things.
Yeah, I feel like Mistborn Era 2, if you started at Alloy of Law and ended at Lost Metal, isn't as tied together. I feel like you would feel the need, like, I have to keep reading to Era 3.
Absolutely. And that makes it feel slightly unsatisfying because it feels like we just finished a series without finishing a series. And he did a good job with Era 1 of leaving it open for more, which this totally could have been left open for more, while still being actually self-contained. So I think that's a really fair criticism. And you also mentioned, Michael, that you found certain plot elements very predictable. There wasn't like an amazing Sanderson twist, which I think is also a really valid criticism to this book.
If we're all readers, we all read a lot of books. Did any of you read the prologue of this book and not predict the ending of Wayne's story?
Oh, yeah, Wayne's ending
was Wayne was going to die.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone...
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't just Wayne was going to die. It was Wayne is going to now make the sacrifice that Wax should have made because Wax now has a family. Like, you know that from page 1.
Totally.
And every single thing that leads to that is completely predictable in a way that I don't try to predict normally because I like to just write it. But that was known from the beginning, and it was... Even like the bigger elements when Wax is running the experiments and he's trying to separate the god metals, you know that stuff happened, and everyone knew that something happened. In my Discord, when everybody was talking about the spoilers for that section, you go, oh, something significant just happened. And the thing that happened was exactly what you thought happened. Yeah. Even if the characters didn't know it, you knew it right away.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, I kind of wish he'd flipped that. So I was actually surprised at the end. Mm-hmm. To jump to spoilers at the end of the book again, things that he left unconcluded at the end of this book, as far as I understand, Wax is a Mistborn, and he doesn't even know it. Is that the case?
That's what I interpreted it as. That's why he kept seeing things out of the corner of his eye, because he didn't realize he was seeing. Yeah.
Right, and he had the is it Lysarium? Is it the metal that turns you into Mistborn? I don't remember, but he had the metal that Wayne did that let him do the awesome conclusion, which was awesome. But you knew it was happening, and you knew it from the beginning when he set up an experiment that even a minor Cosmere science nerd could have figured, like, oh, he separated the metal, he's probably a Mistborn now, and he was. But you never see it. The book ends, it concludes with a new character reestablishing the magic from the first book, which it was the goal of villains in this series, and it happened. And the book ends, the era ends, and it doesn't go anywhere because you know it's going to go somewhere in Era 3
exactly.
and 4.
Yeah, he's leaving the door open to bring that over into the next one, which I think is fine to leave the door open for some things to bleed into the next. But I do agree that there were a lot of major plot points that it's like, oh yeah, I mean, of course it's going to go this way, and then it just does, and then it's like, oh, well, okay.
It just does. And you're like, oh, yeah, I enjoyed that. It was good.
Oh, yeah.
But I wasn't surprised by almost anything that happened in this book.
You know what's interesting, Michael, is I almost think because I don't care about Era 2 that I enjoyed The Lost Metal more because of it. Because
I've seen, okay.
And I know you enjoyed it. I'm not saying you didn't. I'm just saying, like, I had so little expectations that whatever The Lost Metal was, it just was going to be for me. So even though I have gripes, overall, I'm just like, well, great, it's over now, and now we can go to Era 3, and hopefully I like Era 3 better. And like,
in the comments for my review of this book, it has almost been universal where people that loved Mistborn Era 2 were like, oh, this book was fun, but it disappointed me in some ways. And the people that didn't like Mistborn Era 2 were super into it. It was like 5 stars instant love for them because they love the Cosmere stuff.
That's so funny because I don't fall into that category because I have thoroughly enjoyed Era 2. I didn't really like book 1 so much, but books 2 and 3 have been stellar for me. They don't compare to Era 1, they don't compare to Stormlight, but they're not trying to compare. They're trying to be their own thing.
Right.
And for what they are, I've had a blast. And book 4, I had a blast from page 1 to the end. I had so much fun reading this. And I see a lot of what you're talking about, Michael. People either saying like, oh, I love this series, but this one just didn't feel like Era 2. Or people saying, I haven't really liked Era 2, but this felt like Sanderson. And I'm just like, I just like it. I just like it all.
Yeah. And like I said, it's hard to talk about it because the internet can only interpret opinions on one scale of a binary. Where it's like, no, I didn't hate it. I also didn't love it as much as I normally do, but I still really liked it. And that's hard to express.
People have not been liking my 4 stars. Like, people are like, really? You gave it 4 stars? And I'm like, yeah. I gave it 4 stars because it did what it was supposed to do, and I enjoyed myself. But
they think it's too low or too high?
They think it's too low, I think. I think they want me to either, like, love it or not like it. And it's like, no, it was fine. I enjoyed myself. You know, I read it in a day. It was obviously enjoyable, but, like, yeah. I saw the same issues, Michael. I think
that's fair. I've noticed I have another friend who is a big Sanderson Cosmere fan, and he's very plot focused. And he felt that he was very mixed, like you, Michael. He was very mixed, where he was just like, you know, it's well, what he said to me was, it's no Cytonic, so don't worry there. But you know, it's fine. And he's a very plot-focused reader, so I feel like that's probably a factor, because I'm such a character-focused reader, and I loved the characters in this book. I felt like Sanderson really, the groundwork that he did, he was able to just run in this one, and especially Wayne. I feel like he finally found his rhythm with Wayne. I feel like he wrote Wayne the way that he's been trying to write Wayne. Like, Wayne has always been this obnoxious, annoying, nuanced, layered, deeply troubled guy. But he doesn't always come across through the pages the way that I think Sanderson has tried to get him across. But in this book, I think he hit that nuance just right. I don't know if that's like gonna be a hot take or whatever, but that's the way I read him. I feel like he finally got through the page what he's been trying to do, what I love about Wayne. And so, like, as a character reader, and Steris, I'm so happy with Steris in this book. So as a character reader, I'm just thrilled. And then all the Cosmere connections were so fun.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that on Wayne, just because as someone who didn't really like Wayne, I understood Wayne more in this book. I had actually kind of found myself wishing some of this story had come out earlier. Like, some of the details about it wasn't, you know, I guess we assumed he had a troubled childhood, but I wish we'd heard a little bit more about it. And maybe that was just me not reading enough between the pages. I think I struggle because I don't love, like, I'm not in love with a lot of the characters in here. I do love Steris. I've always loved Steris. So seeing Steris in this book is always, like, a pleasure for me because, you know, Sanderson did a pretty good job, actually, of, like, describing social anxiety really well in this book. Like, I did like him describing how Steris felt, and especially, like, the scene where she's like, and I finally realized that not other people feel this way because I just assumed everyone felt the way I did, which is, like, a very social anxiety feeling.
Sure.
And so I did enjoy that a lot. I do think, yeah, he hit some things home that I wish maybe had come out a little bit more in other books, because I think, enjoy that part the most about the Lost Metal. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm also a huge fan of Steris, and I've enjoyed her since book 2.
In book 1, it's hard to understand Steris, but then once book 2 hits, then I really got on board
Well, in book 1, she was abducted and then gone.
Yeah.
Like, there wasn't any Steris in book 1. But yeah, I've always loved her. I feel like I understand her. And in this book we got a POV from her. We got to see her step up and like take action and tell people, pay attention to me or I'm going to throw up on this table, so you have to pay attention to me. And, like all of her Stericisms, she got to shine, and seeing her and Wax really working well together as a couple, and her, when everybody was in a panic and she was like, oh, I have 7 emergency preparedness plans, or I have 7 evacuation plans. This is perfect. And so she's just like, she's ready to go. She falls into place where she belongs. It was very satisfying for me.
I'm trying to figure out if I want to ask this question, because it's going to sound like
I can cut it if it doesn't.
I'm being negative Nancy again.
It's okay.
But with the exception of Steris and partially Marasi, I don't know if I actually fully agree on how much all of the characters, I guess Wayne, but like Wax in particular, and Marasi to some degree, I feel like the characters' arcs partially reset. Like, one of the things that Brandon Sanderson always points out was he had a problem with early television, or 90s television, I suppose, because it felt like at the beginning of every season, the character development that had been established at the end of the previous season got reset so they could retell some of the same stories. Shadows of Self is, I think, a hugely underrated book in like the Cosmere, and the brilliance of the themes in Shadows of Self is that no character really truly understands their identity, and they sort of have to come to grips with that. We revisited that with every single character, with no new growth really from Wax. Marasi sort of explored the same arc that she explored at the end of book 2 and book 3, and it felt cornier in this book because the conclusion to every single character's identity crisis was, you're amazing just the way you are. And like you got the gold sticker for every character, with the exception of maybe Wayne. He's the only one that actually has a character change in this book. And while I loved the fact that we did that previously in the series, I felt like we stepped back and the characters relearned the same lessons they already did, which people in real life do all the time. But in fiction, I don't love that as much. And the answer to every single one of them being I'm just good. I am good the way that I am. And I can be a gunman and a politician and a husband and a father at the same time. Yeah, of course, in real life, those are good things to learn, but we already did learn them.
I think that's fair. And when you said it, it's not something that I recognize, but when you said it, I see it. However, I would argue that Wayne had a huge arc for his religious life. Like, he had, at the end of the last book, he had said, okay, I believe in God, I've talked to him, but I reject him. And then in this book, he... Thanks.
Wax, yeah.
Thanks.
It's okay.
Wax, yes. Yes. But yeah, in this book, he got an arc with that part of his life.
True. He was still avoiding it for most of the book, though.
So he got his arc.
One of the interesting parts about that relationship, now that we're talking about it, though, is Wax hates Harmony at the end of book 2.
Okay.
He still hates Harmony through book 3. In book 3, he has a conversation at his death with Harmony that's really insightful and like way more powerful than, I feel like Sanderson is hitting way above his pay grade with a lot of the conversations that happened between him and Harmony during his death scene. And then he is distant to Harmony in book 4. The actual like thing that I think is really interesting, and once again we don't actually fully get to see it explored until future eras, is when Wax finally comes to grip with God and he starts defending God to other characters that are maybe not as positive on him. Harmony is sus as frick this entire book. Like, the whole book, this is the moment where you're starting to wonder, if you're a Cosmere person, you start to wonder about how the shards can a shard holder be good, or are they so bound to I'm sure that there are Cosmere words for like the name of their shard, the tenet of their shard, that they are hampered from doing things. And the way that Harmony explains it in book 2, where he has to preserve and ruin, is really interesting, and it feels really poignant. But then in this book, Harmony feels like he's just having a villain arc the whole time. And I feel like we see that happen in real time, but we don't get a conclusion to that arc because it's going to be future Mistborn.
Because it's going to be explored further.
It's interesting, right. Michael. I actually do agree with you on the characters in many ways. I actually found a lot of scenes corny in a way that I don't necessarily think Sanderson usually comes off corny to me. But I have felt that way about a lot of Era 2, so it didn't necessarily hit for this one because I have felt there has been a corniness in Era 2 all along. And so I think for me, I was able to get over it. But I will admit some things with Stairs, as much as I like her as a character, did feel cornier in this one. Same with Wayne. Like the scene with Wayne and Harmony at the end after Wayne dies, like I did not need that scene. Like that's a scene that like I have a gripe with because it just was so silly and so corny. And like I can't deal with that sometimes. But I think for me it was just like, well, that's Era 2. So, oh well. But I understand what you mean about maybe the characters didn't make as much growth as you had hoped between the two. But again, I think I am colored by the fact that I am not like as invested in these as characters. So for me, it doesn't matter as much. I will disagree though. I don't feel like Harmony's acting sus. I don't feel like he's having a villain arc, but that's just me.
Oh my.
I don't think he's having a villain arc, but I do see the sus. But
I think he's definitely becoming, like the whole Discord thing. Like I think that has a lot of merit to it, that theory.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's just more showing that he's so tied by his shard.
Well, and it's the conflicting shard's nature.
Yes.
I think that is what we were seeing.
It's starting to pull him down more and more and more, but I don't necessarily attribute that to like Sazed as a character. More the burden he has had to uphold.
Rebuttal?
Yeah,
I
think we're just going to have to disagree on that.
Who's got to be the most suspicious character in the entire Cosmere. So like
Kelsier's so sus.
I'm under.
Kelsier is no beacon of good.
No, he's not. I'm just saying. So
Kelsier...
maybe don't trust me because I apparently in the Cosmere just like attach myself to the sus characters. So maybe it's true that Harmony is sus because I'm like, no, it's just Sazed. He's fine.
We literally see a scene where he tells a direct lie right after you see what he actually did, and then
but he's lying to Kelsier.
He directly lies to Kelsier, and you're like, oh, he's lying to Kelsier. That's an excuse. I don't know, because Kelsier is also sus as frick. Yeah. Like he's a very sketchy character.
To have Larazia, like you want Kelsier to have that secret? No, of course Sazed lies to Kelsier. That is the correct move.
Kelsier's problem is that he would protect Scadrial at all cost, and I don't think he cares at all about the rest of the Cosmere. I think, and you brought up the brilliant point in your books, which is, or in your video, which is, maybe he seems like a villain in Stormlight because he doesn't care about Oshar or whatever the planet is called. Sure. Like, I don't think he cares about any of that stuff. I think he only cares about Scadrial. That's why the Ghostbloods, one of their key tenets is protect Scadrial at all costs. And I think that's why you can paint him that way. Harmony, in theory, cares more about the greater Cosmere, which is why he's sending Khandra out and why he's more Cosmere aware than Kelsier. Well, it's hard to know because Kelsier is very Cosmere aware at this point. But there are times when I think that Kelsier could definitely do what's better for Scadrial in ways that Harmony has proven now he cannot do. Like, he is so tied by having two shards that conflict with one another that you would think it should be more balanced, but I think he's fighting a losing battle, and I really do feel like he's like starting his Breaking Bad arc.
Well, and I mean,
that would be interesting, but I would be surprised.
I would be surprised too. I don't think it's going there, but I do think it's interesting to keep in mind that we know that Ruin kind of won in Era 1, right? He beat Preservation, and so the idea that Ruin is overtaking Preservation again would not be surprising to me. I don't think we're going to go Walter White, but
well, I took it as basically because of Era 1, they were Preservation was fighting a losing battle from the beginning because of the way that the deal went down. Ruin was more powerful, And I'm almost getting the vibes that Ruin is still more powerful. And so even in harmony, he's more likely to win out, is the way that I'm interpreting it.
And I think that's supported by the whole Discord theory going around, that he's going to turn from harmony to Discord. And I think that's very fascinating. I love Sazed, so like it's hard for me to talk against my boy, you know what I mean? So
I also love Sazed.
Yeah, and I feel like the arc that he's gone through, I would be surprised if Sanderson went in that direction, just based off of the history that we have with him. It just doesn't feel like a choice that Sanderson would make, but it would be interesting to see.
It's because it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good in my heart.
It doesn't feel good, but then we start to wonder, like, and Sanderson is a lot more of a hopeful writer than a grim dark writer, so that's a major support to that theory. I mean, I agree with the like meta narrative. I don't think he'll go that way, but it felt like he was going that way to me.
Speaking of Sanderson being a hopeful writer, we got to see the Allomancers that have been kidnapped in this book, and where people like Abercrombie and Martin and Erickson and so many authors would have gone in a very different direction. We got a very happy end for them. We got to find them. They were safe. They were just, it was very sad that they were in the bunkers.
Though. It was
very sad, the situation that they were in. I just mean, like, they got out. It was okay. You know, like, there's hope for a future for them. And it was. I really appreciated going into the bunkers because I honestly had kind of forgotten about that plot line, and seeing the condition that they were in and the lies that they were told. They were, you know, like that one guy who said, I have 3 daughters. Are they okay? Like, all that kind of stuff. It was just so sad, the life that they've built around lies. But I was happy to see them be able to find their freedom, and that's not carried on.
Yeah, it was interesting. I didn't forget about them. I thought they were dead. I thought they were all used to fuel, you know, spikes. That was my my guess. I just thought, well, yeah, they all got spiked and magic stolen and are dead. So it was interesting that, they aren't, you know? Mm-hmm. I had a sneeze, but it left.
That was my assumption as well.
Okay. I didn't want to start talking.
I had a sneeze and then it... Okay. But yeah, so I think, so I did really like that plot point. I thought it was very interesting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my assumption was that they had been essentially killed off. So it was cool to see them. Also, I don't know if it counts as a plot trope, but the whole... we're lying to people and keeping them in a completely isolated society to try to do X is one of my favorite tropes.
Oh, really?
Like in all like it's such a like
it's
I
so
mean
specific.
There's the example, but yeah, like there are a number of my favorite stories that all include some group of people being sequestered away from society to try to keep some aspect of society either preserved or eliminated from the society. And as soon as they found the video or the miniature models, I was like, holy crap, he went there. I knew exactly what they were doing at that point. I didn't realize it was the captured Allomancers, but I'm like, why in the world did he fake Fallout these people?
That's
I actually noticed when they found the models as well. I was like, oh, clearly they're tricking people. I don't know who. Like, I didn't know it was going to be like an underground society of the Allomancers, but I also was like, okay, they've tricked somebody. Just who is it? You know?
That made me happy, and that was maybe one of the more surprising elements of it, because they put that in this book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, were y'all? I was not surprised that Telson was still a massive threat in this book. I was a bit surprised that Telson was who Trell chose.
I thought she was going to be the big bad. I mean, maybe I just wasn't on fan forums enough. I was still not sure if it was going to be Odium or not that was threatening them.
Sure.
So I did really like getting to know that it was Autonomy. I was like very happy that it was a different shard, because that was like very fascinating to like see that. I actually quite liked that plot point of Telson in her mind being like, well, this is the best thing because we're going to go down no matter what. And then, you know, knowing that his uncle had a different plan, and the leader of whatever that town was out in the roughs has a different plan, and how they're in their heads trying to do things for Scadrial. And then you've got even Kelsier, who's not, you know, dealing with autonomy, but like I think that was one of the more interesting points of seeing very many different perspectives of like, well, this is for the greater good and what that means, I thought was interesting.
Yeah, and I think it was good for Wax's character as well to really have to face her again and get that full circle with their confrontations. What were you going to say, Michael?
The shard autonomy, just like everything related to that fact, the ways that autonomy works differently than the other shards, if you are exploring the Cosmere side of that, is super, super cool and interesting. And then the minor exploration that they did and what does autonomy even mean, I loved. That was like where I could put my hipster glasses on and be like, oh, what is originality and what is what is good? Like that's where I actually vibed with some of that stuff.
Yeah.
So autonomy being Trell, or Trell being autonomy, I guess, was one of the most interesting parts. The fact that it was just Telsin, to me, was another point of frustration. Like, whatever the trope is it... Whatever the trope is where somebody's family is the secret plot line key or whatever, like, that's like my kryptonite. Like, I don't like when people's birth alone makes them important, if that makes any sense.
We discovered that with the set a few books ago, though. So was it a problem for you a few books ago?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, like finding out that everything in the plot line had to do with Wax's uncle and then Wax's sister, like all of that stuff.
So you don't like Star
whatever.
Wars?
You know, I don't like to.
I'm just kidding.
I feel like you're ready to fight. You just put your fists up.
I only say that
this is on Murphy's channel. I'll say whatever I want to.
No.
That annoys the crap out of me.
I was just, because my favorite meme about Star Wars is how it's just one family that's screwing over the entire galaxy. So it was just like, that's what that reminded me of when you said that. Like, is Era 2 just that? Like, man, Wax's family is just screwing over the whole planet. Yeah, I think autonomy was a really interesting shard to explore. I agree. In fact, one of my favorite parts about meeting new shards is trying to explore what it means. Even like the ruin and preservation thing has still been very interesting, seeing that struggle. Yeah, I really like those parts.
Revisiting secret history allows you to see a lot more of the stuff that's going on behind the scenes with preservation specifically. And so seeing the ways that those are affecting harmony, and then seeing the ways that whatever the core tenet of the shard is affects the host. I can't spoil other things from other Cosmere, but the way that it's like, what Sazed's personality is, and you can see that when he becomes harmony, it's a conflict. It does change who he is. And so there is some aspect of the original character there. But then whatever the shard is also starts to have a major influence on the way that they do things. And autonomy, Trell as a shard, is now one of the most interesting to me because it's such a weird thing. Especially like autonomy can splinter into multiple pieces that could in theory be in conflict with each other because they're supposed to be autonomous.
Right.
And that's really, really, really cool to me.
Yeah. We could definitely get some interesting things coming from all of that.
I loved exploring more splinters in a different context than Stormlight. I don't think that's a spoiler to say that. But we've seen splinters, right, in Stormlight. It was interesting to do that. And I agree with you, like, this is now, I won't say more, but we have another opportunity in the Cosmere to potentially see how a shard might change a character. And I think that has been something I'm very fascinated with, like, especially because Sazed was such a beloved character, I think, from Era 1. So people knew who he was. And so seeing that is very interesting. And I'm excited to see more of that throughout the Cosmere. Like, just in general, I thought there was a lot of good discussions in this book for that reason.
Yes, I agree. And speaking of Cosmere stuff, how did y'all feel about how Sanderson handled all the characters that came in, like, from other worlds?
Right. I love that we're just doing it. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I love that we're just doing it now. I like that the gloves are off. That's what he specifically said in his live stream where he was talking about it. I love that we're finally just embracing the fact that, yeah, there's people that are world hopping and they're going to have different magical abilities, and seeing those magical abilities interplay is really, really cool. I'm excited to see how that goes forward more. I think that while I praise that, it is in conflict with me wanting to see Era 2 end in an Era 2 way, because so much of the book was Cosmere related, but because I also love the Cosmere stuff and seeing the way that they interplay, I thought it was really cool.
I'd be super interested just to hear from someone who's only read Mistborn, how they feel. For me, I feel like it's cool because I think you could just read Mistborn and you wouldn't need the extra context. Like, I think it makes sense, but I wonder how people feel like, wow, that might feel like a lot. All of a sudden there's other worlds, because if you've only been reading Mistborn, like, it's introduced, but maybe the scale of it wasn't. But yeah, I personally, I mean, that was like my favorite part of The Last Metal, because like I'm not super invested in Era 2. So like for me, the Cosmere stuff was like what was made, like that was what I was like really excited about. So
I had so much fun with it.
I was actually very bummed Marcy didn't join the Ghostbloods. Like I really, really wanted her to, because I wanted her to be like, yeah, let's go world hop with Marcy. And then she was like, no. And I was like, okay, whatever. I get it. But like, still, come on.
Yeah.
Like, I get it. Yeah. But I was hoping that maybe
it made sense for her character, but it would have been cool.
It would have been fun.
I understand. I think as a fan of Cosmere and of Sanderson, it was so fun to just be on my Discord and seeing a new person and seeing their new powers and talking with everybody and discussing like, okay, who do we think this one is? And so the community aspect of it made this, I mean, it would have been fun on my own, but the community aspect of it made it so fun. And I think that's one thing that Sanderson does really well, is he incorporates things in his books that instigate community interaction, which makes it feel a lot more fun to me.
Yes,
but
sure.
I do think that if I had picked up Mistborn because somebody told me to, and then read through that, and then read through this, I would have felt like this book went off the rails. Like, it would not. I think Sanderson did a good job of making it so that it all makes sense. Everything you need to know is there. Everything you don't need to know is just an Easter egg. He did a good job in that way. But just from a, like, why are we doing this without being involved in the greater fandom, it would feel like weird. It would feel so unnatural.
It would feel like a lot. Like, it would feel like maybe you signed up for one thing and you're getting other things. But presumably, if you're only reading Mistborn in isolation, you've never been online, you don't know that he has connected things.
Yes.
You would think you were getting into a fantasy, and then all of a sudden it's turning kind of like into a fantasy sci-fi. And I would love to know people's feelings, although maybe at this point there's not as many readers that are that in isolation. I just don't know.
Sure.
I don't know.
It's also an interesting financial power play where he takes one of his least or less popular series and he now makes it something that if you actually care about the Cosmere, you kind of have to, you don't have to read it now, but you kind of have to read it now.
Yeah.
Because there's so many key elements of Cosmere pieces talked about in this book. And I don't think that was his reason for doing it, but it works.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and there were things that he set up in this book, too. There were things that he introduced in this book that he's going to springboard off of. And I'm sure he'll do it in a way so that, again, it's cohesive in its own right. But if you're a part of the fandom, it's going to be hard to ignore. It's going to be hard not to participate in this element, too, to not feel left behind.
My guess is that after Mistborn and Stormlight, like any other books he writes, like standalones or whatever, are probably going to be like, well, you have to read multiple series. Like, at some point, he's going to have a series or a book where it's like, well, you actually have required reading. Like, so far, it hasn't happened.
I feel like he has to pull the trigger at some point to make to be able to pay off the things that he's teasing. And I like that idea, but I like that idea because I've read the 20 other books already. It's a weirder thing to bring up to other people, but also the people that read books are more okay with that ask, I think, than maybe if it was like, to watch this movie, you have to watch 30 movies. Sure. But I don't know.
Well,
movies are easier to watch.
Isn't that what the new Spider-Man
it doesn't exist
was?
with the MCU.
Like, you gotta...
Marvel.
You gotta watch all the other things.
Like, every
Marvel in general.
Show at this point, I feel like.
Yeah.
It's hard to know. I'm just like trying to analyze it from a business standpoint or a popular culture standpoint. Like, if he makes that jump where now to read Stormlight 6, you really just have to have read everything else, because he's going to make reminders, but he's also going to assume that you've read the rest of the stuff. How does that translate to the popular culture in general? Because I don't know the answer. I don't think it's ever really truly been explored in that way.
I feel like it's going to make him a lot less accessible whenever he does pull that trigger.
Right, and that's what, and like I loved your video on Sanderson you put out recently. One of the things that's really cool about Sanderson is he is very accessible in so many ways, even though I think he has a lot more depth than you might initially assume if you just see the prose of Mistborn. Like, yes, there's a lot of depth and there's a lot of cool things happening here. It's just done in a different way, but he will lose some level of accessibility if you're an audiobook listener, you now have like 1,000 hours of catch up to do to read the new book. Like that's a weird scenario to put people in.
It'd be interesting to me because I'm really convinced that he will keep Stormlight pretty able to function on its own, only because Stormlight is like his biggest series. It's his most popular series. I think it's what really has brought his popularity even more. Like I know Mistborn was big for him, but I really think Stormlight is what's done it. So I'd be surprised if 10 Stormlights you have to read everything else. But then at the same time, with all the Cosmere stuff in Lost Metal, it's like, wow, in 6 more books, how is it possible that it could in any way stay like within itself?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. And maybe he'll just reintroduce the characters in a way that it won't matter that you don't know their histories. Like, that's a possibility. But it is...
Sure.
I mean, we have, like 3 decades before we get the answer to that question. So I guess we can all reconvene 30 years, we can answer the question.
Too, also, with the adaptations coming out, people are going to start picking up his books for the first time, and it will be people who are not involved in the fandom. It'll be people that have seen the trailers for the movies or have watched the movies and want to dive in, and they're not on Reddit, they're not on BookTube, they're not in these spheres, they're not watching his lectures or his live streams, and once they get to the Lost Metal, they're going to be a little bit shocked. You know what I mean?
Maybe they'll love it. I don't know. Will they make it that far? Like, if we're talking adaptation, it's just the first era of Mistborn. Like, there's a good chance they won't go any further than that. Like, it's hard to say.
That's true. That's fair.
But the adaptation question is just such a big can of worms for so many reasons. Because, like, if you make an adaptation, it almost instantly becomes a separate canon than the books. So will it draw people in? Will they be able to have those conversations? Because he's not... I don't know if you guys have explored like even Brandon's like his preliminary writing of the Mistborn adaptation himself. Like he deleted and replaced characters.
Well,
so
he wrote 2,
at that
right?
point you're already dealing with a separate canon, right? Yes.
He wrote one that was like, he said for an experiment, he wanted to write a Mistborn adaptation where not a single scene in the movie appeared in the book.
I did not hear about that one.
He said that. He said he wrote one once just to see if he could write a screenplay where not a single movie scene happens in the book, but it got the same point across. Which obviously I was like, Sanderson, stop talking. Shh, I don't want to hear about this anymore.
That's not what I want.
But I do think Sanderson is not afraid to play with his own canon to make a better movie, which like I think it's a good skill for an author to have. I am happy he is someone who has that. Like, he's not so tied, but it is scary. Yeah. It'll be interesting how these adaptations go.
Yeah. So, getting back on the book, I think the main thing that we haven't discussed in detail that we've brought up, but we haven't really dug into, is Wayne's sacrifice, which is what everything ended on. I thought that it was written impeccably. I thought the decision to it, I mean, obviously the clues were very, very strong, so we all saw it coming. But as far as the decision, him doing it, the fallout of Wax's reaction and then Maricy's reaction, I personally loved his conversation with Harmony afterwards. It's okay. I just love him. And then the statue and the quotes that they chose, like all of it. I thought it was so fun, and I thought that it was really, really well written. However, here's my negative moment of the video. However, Daggum Sanderson uses one of my least favorite tropes too often. He is constantly either fake out deathing or resurrecting. And so even though I thought the moment was written so well, I couldn't feel it because I was just like, he's not dead. He's fine.
I actually think Wayne is dead.
Oh.
He totally is!
Yeah.
But I didn't get to feel it in the moment, because in the moment, I was like, no, nobody dies in this world, which is not true. It was me being bitter and bratty. But, like, that's how I was feeling in the moment. I was like, he'll be fine. And then even after he was declared dead...
resurrected by Kelsier in Mistborn?
It's more the fake
Wax,
out deaths.
Wax
Sort of did.
dies, essentially.
Wax
and
does die.
Harmony's like, do you just want to come back to life?
But
or
the
do you want to
fake
go to
out
heaven?
deaths are not infrequent. And
true.
I was just like, it's not real. And then even when he was declared dead, I was like, I haven't seen a body. So, like, I don't believe you. And then whenever, was it Marsh that said, yeah, he's passed on? I was like, I didn't get to mourn him because I don't trust Sanderson to kill his characters. And I was so mad about it.
It's funny because I never believe anyone's dead, so I never get fooled by those fake out deaths because I was taught by my dad very early on, if you don't see a body, they're not dead. Like, he taught me that when I was like 10 years old in a movie theater once, and I've never forgotten it. But it was funny because with Wayne, I was like, oh, he's definitely dead. Like, I can tell this time.
I wanted to feel it because I love Wayne, and it was such a great sacrifice, and I didn't feel it until it was too late to feel it, and I was so mad about it. But I thought it was written really well. I enjoyed the scene.
I loved it, and I thought that it was great, and I think that if I hadn't had so much foreshadowing that it was going to happen, I probably wouldn't have been prepared. But I'd built myself up a wall at that point that I would be able to handle it. So yeah, I loved it, and the statue thing was great for me because it was like, and I think it's gonna rub people that don't like Wayne the wrong way. They're like, how dare they put that quote on a statue? Like, it's what
Wayne.
he would have wanted. It wouldn't make sense any other way. And the fact, like, maybe the extra touch was the fact that they made the hat interchangeable. Like, that was the part that got me where I was like, oh, that's good.
Yeah.
It's not just the quote and the fact they have interchangeable quotes. It's the fact that they changed the hats as well. I was like, oh, that touches me a little bit.
Here's the thing. I agree. The quote's great. It's like, when we talk about one of my least favorite tropes is, why is everyone getting statues? Is that like a really common thing? Because it happens in a lot of fantasy.
City.
I know.
I feel like it was in history for a very long time.
True. I guess we had you go to London and there's like a billion statues of all the people. It just always is like,
right?
Because we just don't do it now. Really, we don't give people statues, and so like for some reason the statue trope is always like, so we're building them a statue. Okay, let's like, I don't know.
He saved the city!
Let's name a bar after Wayne.
They were all going to get tidal waved away.
Naming a bar after Wayne.
Name a bar
also
after, or like even better name like.
That would be pretty good.
I actually, one underrated thing I feel like I did like about Wayne in this book is I liked Wayne being rich. I thought that was a very funny subversion. I was not expecting it. I was like, oh my gosh, he's in debt again, and then he's just like so wealthy. That was a little funny to me. It was very silly.
Oh yeah,
but it was like just the right amount of silly for me.
Well, it was perfect because he was wealthy because of his investments, which was basically just like throwing money at the wall because he didn't like being wealthy, and it just all worked. Like, he invented organized sports.
It was so like that. It was a combination of good ideas and bad ideas because he got his original wealth from helping that girl. Was it from book 2 or 3?
I think it was,
where the girl came up with the light bulb.
Yeah, like, and then he was like, he felt bad because like he impersonated the person who stole the idea or whatever, so he just like invested in her.
Yeah, and then so he helped her, and then that was his initial jump off. So like that's a little bit of character development, and then he creates sports and like popular culture as we know it, which is a pretty hilarious world building thing to throw in as a joke.
It was perfect.
So that was pretty good.
Yeah, and then I love that in the end he used his wealth. Like, he came to the conclusion that meeting with that girl every single month was not helpful to her, and then setting up the system that he did, and then giving all the money to her. Well, pretty much all the money to her. Like, I loved that.
Yes. Even the money that didn't go to her, that was basically an ever
torture
eternal fun to just troll Wax, was so perfect.
Oh,
it was
perfect.
great.
Yeah,
it was great
amazing.
character development.
It was amazing that he thought of that.
I don't know if it was in my Discord or if it was on Instagram, but there was somebody posted the meme of Taylor Swift at the beginning of that one album. She's like, you want to know where the old Taylor is? She's dead, but it was Wayne. And it was like, oh, that is such a perfect meme for this scene where he's talking about dying. I was like, okay, this was very fun, and also kind of hinted that he was going to die, but was still very, very good.
Which Milan broke up with him, which was another foreshadowing for me.
That was rough.
When she broke up with him, I was like, oh, okay, so now he doesn't have any ties. All right, well, there's that, isn't it? But, like, that means we get to see more of Milan later?
Yes, Milan, as a a world hopper is awesome, and the fact that she still felt bad, like in her, I think it was her epilogue, where she still had feelings for Wayne because she didn't mean to get attached. That got me a little bit as well.
That actually
Because
did get me
I was a known
bit
Milan
too.
hater.
It's hard not to be a sucker a little bit for like trying to explore what it would be like to be immortal. And connections don't mean a lot. And I think we get that a lot in fantasy. So every once in a while having one where it's like, oh, connections still mean something when you live a long time. It does feel a little different since it's usually like, oh, they're all cold and unfeeling. Right. And so I did like that for Milan as well. I'm a big Milan fan. Milan's probably my other character I really like from Era 2, and I'm glad we get to see more of her.
Milan's so fun. Yes, I agree. Who do you think stole or drained the Bands of Mourning?
I don't even know.
I'm going to say what my theory is because I have a theory and I'm super excited about it. I think it was Alec.
Okay. Oh.
Now let me tell you why. Okay, because the Ghostbloods, when they were trying to recruit Marcy, they said it's because we want the outcasts, we want the people that are invisible, the people that slip through the cracks, not like Wax, who's constantly drawing attention to himself. But then they added on, and you have this connection with the Malwish people. And she was like, oh, Alec? He's not as important as you might think. I think that was a clue! I think that they got Alec to do it, and then that's why we don't have much from the Malwish people, because that's going to be a massive plot point later on.
Can Alec drain them, though?
I don't know. Maybe he brought it to someone who
they don't
can.
Have allomancy, right? Because they're always like pretending to worship.
Anyone could train them.
The other ones?
There's some way he did it. It's fine. And then, because the Malwish people did get a huge benefit from it being drained, you know?
Right.
So, he also has, like, there's that benefit of helping that agenda, and, like, I think it ties pretty well to the Ghostbloods. I don't know. I think that's what it is. I'm almost never right.
No, I mean, that could be a good theory. It has to be somebody you know, otherwise it's not interesting. Right. And that seems like a good candidate.
Yeah, for me, because I had so many problems with how that scene played out, it is a mystery that it's a mystery that should thrill me or interest me, but I struggle because I feel like the scene was mishandled. Not like I know how to write, but it was so short. I just wish we had a little bit more time with that scene. Like, now they have them.
They make the decision so fast.
Yeah.
And then things
it's an emergency.
shift so fast.
It
is an emergency.
It felt too
when
fast.
has Brandon Sanderson ever used that to do something fast?
And Tenzin being like, great, I'm going to go get him right now. And then, like, I was like, Tenzin, what are you doing? You're way better than this. So
when has Tenzin ever done something fast, especially in Era 2? Like,
maybe Tenzin did it. Maybe he's the key player here.
I mean,
yeah.
I don't. And even like the Bands of Mourning, like, it would be a lot to drain them. So, I don't know. I love Murphy, I like your theory as much as any other theory. So,
I like that your attitude is basically like, I don't care. Can we talk about something else?
I know I will care. I'm sure once we find out, I will care. But I'm just like, I'm much more interested in like, who's Milan going to go save, which I don't think we can really talk about in this discussion. I have ideas now that I've talked about it, but like, that's just more like, what's happening with Harmony? He lied to Kelsier. What's Kelsier gonna do now? Like, let's go have Marcy save Shay. Like, those are the things that I think thrill me just like a little bit more.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Yeah. I like your theory. I'm on board. It's Alec. I'm going to start spreading it.
It just adds to the pile of things that are brought up in this book that are severe mysteries that have major consequences on the events of this book, but we don't get answered because it's a setup for something else, which that's just my frustration.
I'm really surprised we like literally never go back to the Bands of Mourning thing. Like, that is probably one of the bigger mysteries, and I'm like, wow, you really just weren't going to address that at any point? It's interesting.
Yeah.
This book is called The Lost Metal, and it's alluding to, like, they say the Lost Metal is Atium, and we see Atium on page known for one scene and unknown for two scenes.
Yeah.
Atium is on the page for two scenes.
Is Atium the Lost Metal, or is it both Atium and Lerasium?
Well, I guess you could draw it both ways. I think the characters refer to ATM as the Lost Metal previously, but either way, they only exist essentially in the same scene together. Like when he blows up the thing and makes them, and then Harmony hands out ATM to Marsh. That's the only scene that metal is in the book. And the Losarium, then I guess 2 people got it because...
Wax and Wayne.
The other cool thing, minor mention, Wayne potentially moves faster than the speed of light, I think, at the end of the book, which is, like, that's a world-building... no pun intended, bomb to set off in your book where people care about the science. Like in a book, in a series where you can listen to a Q&A for a Brandon Sanderson story and you have one of those nerds come up and ask a Cosmere question and he has the answer.
Yeah.
He doesn't put a character moving faster than the speed of light in a book if he doesn't intend to use that for something significant down
So
the
I'm
road.
thinking, like, are we doing time warps? What are we doing with this in the future?
He said he will never do time travel, but if we're going to get world hopping without having to go through Shadesmar, that's probably something.
That's what I was thinking too. Like, is it... Sorry, go ahead.
Well, sorry, I just read the 3 Body Problem trilogy, and there's a lot of discussion about the speed of light in that trilogy. Have you read that, Michael?
No, but I know a
Have you
decent
read
amount
that
about
No,
it.
I haven't. No.
Okay.
I know.
Let me tell you. If you want to escape the solar system in science fiction, you need to be able to move faster than the speed of light. That's like what that whole trilogy is about. So to me, the faster than speed of light was like, oh, he's just setting up for space travel. So
yes.
I think that's just really what it's going to end up being, because we know that Era 4 is going to be a space opera anyway. There's also some pretty deep Cosmere magic theories about how they're going to get into space. I am not equipped to explain those at this current time, but I have read them and tried to internalize them.
Yeah.
I think
Someone tried to tell me there's going to be 5 Mistborn eras. Am I wrong? Was that person wrong?
Let's see. We have Era 3, which is going to be 80s, and Era 4, that's space opera. Those are the 4 I know about.
Yeah, I had always heard 4 as well. I read that comment on your video, Michael, but
What did
hadn't
he say
heard
Era
that.
5 was going to be?
Well,
I think Era 5 was supposed to be space travel, and there was supposed to be like a cyberpunk era in between the 80s and the space. I don't remember
But isn't
exactly.
cyberpunk
And
what he's going to be doing with the 80s?
I would have listen.
Sorry.
I cannot understand everything in the Cosmere, no matter how many hours I try, no matter how many videos I watch or books I read.
Here's the thing. Look, Sanderson adds eras and books all the time. So I'm not going to sit here and pretend there's not 5 at some point that I missed a live stream where he talked about it. As far as I have heard, I have only heard 4 as well, currently.
at some point, he's going to write a book just as a exercise.
Palate cleanser,
A palate cleanser, thanks. Just as a palate cleanser. And he's going to be like, this is just for fun for me. And then he's going to be like, wait a second. I have a whole new world I've
Didn't we already
created.
get that with A Year of Sanderson?
Well, that's what Alloy of Law was.
That's what
it was
Alloy of
just
Law
a writing
was.
exercise.
That's what I'm saying. There's only supposed to be 3 eras, and then Alloy of Law happened, so maybe, you know.
And then, yes, you're right. Year of Sanderson was, I need to do more.
Why not?
Okay,
Will those be standalones?
I think so, yeah. I'm pretty sure.
They said they were.
But will they? Good point. Good point. Was there anything else that y'all wanted to discuss about the Lost Metal before we sign off?
No, I feel like I need to show it because I did take it off my shelf. This is the book we've been talking about.
Michael, are you a booktuber or are you a schnitzel?
I own it in every format but physical.
I mean, I didn't read it physically because it came like at 9 p.m. the night it came out, so I read it digitally, but I got it.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think overall, like, I had a good time with Eric. Like, it was a good time. That is how I feel about The Lost Metal.
I had a great time. It was
I had a
so
lot of
fun.
fun. Yeah.
It's fun.
Yep. Well, it was good. I'm glad actually that I got people on here that had some pretty differing. I mean, like, we were all positive, but I'm definitely like, this was great. So it was nice. It was nice to have not just a hype video. But thank you both for joining me for this discussion. Like I said, I will have both Bookborn and Michael's channels linked in the description, as well as specifically Bookborn's video about all the Cosmere connections that happened in the Lost Metal. So if you are interested in digging a little bit deeper into the Cosmere connections, getting a couple answers for maybe some of the characters that you weren't sure about, that's all in this video. Michael has a spoiler-free video that'll be specifically linked. Check them both out. Subscribe, notifications. They're both amazing. Thank you both for taking the time to join me for this video, and we will see you guys again soon. Bye.